Hello, my lovely viewers. How are you doing? Today is day number 7 and the C-Sharp full course in 10 days using W3Schools website. We have been talking about C-Sharp in last 6 days. Today, day number 7, we're going to talk more about the switch statement. How do we use switch and case in C-Sharp to make more decisions and make the code more simpler in various different situations. We're also going to go through some real world examples and I'm going to solve some real world problems for you guys using W3Schools website. Okay, so we have been using W3Schools website. It's a reference website just for the notes, so you can easily follow along and you know exactly what I'm doing. Rather than just watching my video, you can just play this website along with it. Again, a quick disclaimer: this is not the W3Schools website's official tutorial, nor is it being sponsored by them. Before we go further, if you still haven't subscribed my channel and you are watching these tutorials, please do subscribe. I'm making these 10-day sessions. If you have not watched previous videos, the link's in the description, or you click on the eye icon and you can find those tutorials. So make sure you watch all these previous tutorials so you can follow along easily. And today we're going to discuss more about switch statement. Leave your likes and comments. They help us a lot and encourages a lot if you really like these videos. This is Dr. Shanvardi. Let's begin. Okay, so what do we mean by switch statements? Switch statements are used to select one of many code blocks to be executed. Switch statements behave or are a different spin-off from if-else statements. They do check conditions. They are also under a branch of conditional statements. They work like if-else statements where certain condition is satisfied, then a piece of block is executed. But here there are many blocks to choose from, that which block to execute if a certain situation is satisfied. Okay, so if certain situation is satisfied, certain block will execute, and you have option to give many blocks as well. So it works again same as switch, as if else. Okay, the way we write it, we say we have a switch statement, bracket start, bracket close, and we write an expression here. Then we block is start and then block is close at the bottom, and at the middle we now give something called case and break structure. We have a case and break structure. We have a default with a break structure. This typically behaves as a switch in case. The switch expression is evaluated once. Okay, so here's the key thing. The system goes, this expression is checked once. The value of expression is compared with the value of each case. So whatever we write here, this actually is evaluated with this each case individually. Okay, simply speaking, switch in case works with or is always working in form of equal to operator. Okay, it always behaves like equal to. So we write a value and then we write another value here, and these two values are compared. If these two values match, the code below the case executes. If they do not match, the next case is evaluated. So expression checks case number 2. If this value and this value match exactly using equal to comparison, then this block of code is executed, else everything else is ignored. Okay, so if these two catches don't match, then finally default is executed. Default will execute when none of the cases actually match the expression. So that's why we call it switch and case, where each case is individually mapped with their expression. So expression is there, and individually we check each case against it. We can have, I believe, 999 cases. So here we can write as many cases as we want. Okay, this is very much associated with block of code executed. Okay, so the block that executes is connected with the case. So if the case true, only then that block of code will execute. The break and the default keywords will be described later in this chapter. Okie dokie. So let's move on forward. So here's an example of how this works. So this example below uses weekday numbers to calculate the weekday name. Okay, so assumingly if I give you a number, you tell me which day of the week that is. So let's just evaluate this. Now what's happening? We have integer day is equals to 4. So we create a variable. We store the value of 4 in this variable, which is of type integer. Then we say switch, switch with a small s. Again, switch is a keyword, is also a reserve word. So is case, so is break, and so is default. Okay, I don't think so they've used default here. So is default. By reserve word means you cannot use switch as a variable name. You cannot use switch as a method name, and you cannot use switch as a class name. So you need to be very careful about that. Same goes for the case and break as well. These are reserved words by C# for itself. So now we're going to say, hey, listen, I have a variable called day that contains a value 4. So I pass that value to the switch. So this is where our expression comes into play. So the value of day has been passed here. Now what the switch will do, it will take this value of day, which is supposed to be 4, and map it to each of these cases, or in other words will evaluate using equal to comparison, that is the value of day equal to this one, is the value of day equal to this value 2, or is this value of day equal to the case 3, or is this value of day equal to case 4, and now it becomes true. Okay, so it will compare with each case individually. If the value of day becomes true, then it will execute the code and ignore all other statements. That's it. Okay, again similarly it behaves like an if else, but it's a simpler version of evaluating a multiple block of code. If you were to write the same thing in if else, you would end up doing something like this. This code here, see, we have so many if else, if else, if else, if else, if else statements. The same can we can do same with this as well, but then it will means if day is equals to 4, else if day is equals to 2, else if day is equals to 3, else if day is equal. So it will be else if, else if, else if, else if, else if, so longer time. So using switch in case in certain comparisons makes it more easier to follow, because you have directly evaluating a single case, and if the case is true, the block is executed. If the case is false, it's next one is compared. But the key point here is, and the disadvantage here is, that the day is mapped using equal to with this value. So this is a value here. It's not 1, 2, 3. You can write any number of values here. Or even you can use a variable here, no problem with that. And that variable's value, or that value will be mapped with this day. If they both are match, then the block will execute using equal to operation. There is no relational operation here. There's no relational checking here. So unlike in our earlier program, we check a relation, that is it greater than this value and needs to be less than this value. This unfortunately cannot be done in switch statements, because switch will always do equal to comparison. So if you check this code, it says Thursday because case 4 is now true, and it does. So sometimes we read it day is equal to 4. So instead of using the word case, if you use the word equal to, it starts to make more sense. Okay, so that's because it's always checking the same thing. So we say day for value 4, day's day is equal to 1. Now is this day equal to this 2? So now this day equal to 3. As soon as this case becomes true, it executes and then it breaks out. Understand? So this is what a simple switch in case statement does. So now let's understand the version of this default for now. Again, they have not used the default here. Let me just try to put in it. What if I give, for example, 41 day? Okay, now if I execute, nothing should happen. Okay, and that's why I wanted to use this. This compiler is a little bit faster as compared to this one for some reason. They're still executing blah 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 blah. Anyway, so if this happens, there's no output and we get no information. So that's why we write something called default. Okay, colon, and then we print the statement here. We say, listen, if there's a default, go into console dot write line bracket start bracket close semicolon at the end, inverted quotation marks, and we say enter week day between 1 and 7. Okay, so now that means that if my day is 41 and none of the cases are matched, the default will automatically execute. Okay, the default will automatically execute. So if I run the code, okay, so if I run the code, I get an error. It says control cannot fall out of the switch. So we say, why is that? Control cannot fall out of switch statement through final case label case default. Okay, so this error is again, hang on, why this error is there? Okay, sorry, we need to write break here. Now if I run the code, okay, so enter the day between 1 and 7. So we say enter the day 1 and 7. So if no case is true, it falls between that. Why we need the break statement? Let's talk more about that. So basically, you need the break statement to break out of a switch block. This will stop the execution of more code and case testing inside the block. When match is found and the job is done, it's time to break. There is no need for testing. Okay, so let me explain exactly what this English is saying. This is saying that, listen, if you don't use break, okay, so if I don't use break here, what happens is that the day 1 is checked and the value here is 1, for example. To say day is equals to 1, day is equals to 1, this case becomes true. It executes this statement. But then once this executes this statement, it assumes that all other statements are also true, and it starts to execute other cases as well. And this is where it makes problem. So that's why it's throwing us error that control cannot fall through from one case label, case 1 to another. So it's giving us an error that, see, what's happening is that, or what the way it works is that if case 1 becomes true, now system will not evaluate every single case. It will just assume that this body is true, it will execute, and it will try to execute this line of code as well. But because this line of code is in case 2, it gets confused, and that's why it generates an error. If you're doing in Java there's no error. It will just simply execute this line of code as well. Okay, and that's where we call it a logical error. However, in C Sharp, it says, listen, I understand your case 1 is true, and you don't have a break statement. But the problem is, once a case is true, now this after this statement, I should execute or should not execute this line of code. I'm confused. For us, we say, hey, you don't need to because the case 2 is there. But it does not now consider case 2 anymore, because for its purpose, the case is already true. Either one of the cases true, it will consider every case below it true. So it generates an error and says that I cannot fall through it. Your case 1 is there, but it seems that you have another statement that is below it, and before this statement there is a case. Remember, there is no semicolon, this is a colon, and that's why the problem is there. If there was a semicolon, that marks the end of statement, no problem with that. But after this line of code, it's confused what to do with this case. Okay, this is how it's internally built in. So the part of its core syntax is that we always use a break statement. It just stops the code of execution and breaks it from this point to this point here, and everything below this break is completely ignored. Okay, so that's why it's saying that, hey, I need a break statement to ensure that the code after first case is true is breaks, and the code's execution is automatically blocked here and come out. This does not happen with the if else statement. For example, if I use the statement called 40 here, or let's just say 20 here, and I execute this code, it says your marks are 42, D grade. So it means the marks are somewhere between here. Your grade is D, and then the code automatically breaks from this point and comes out. All other lines below this are automatically ignored. Okay, when we use if else statements, these lines are automatically ignored. We don't need to use break. But for switch, that execution is not there. So switch works, as I said, in a different manner. It uses a colon here to evaluate a case or put up their case, and it means like it's a half done thing. It's my sentence is not complete. If this is true, then you need to complete this sentence, but then there is no semicolon and there's a case here, and this creates a problem. So it says I need a break statement. So it becomes a part of it that you write a case. If the case is true, the statements are need to here, and then you break it out. The other problem with this is that if you write this statement here, console dot write line, and then I put a statement, inverted quotations, after the break break. Now what should happen now? This will again generate an error. Okay, because this after the break the control stops and the code just follows to this point. So it says Monday, I printed, but this line is now not printed at all. It's completely ignored because we have already done a manual break, and we said, hey, break here, don't go here, and print everything else. If you're using Java will generate an error here. Okay, Java will say, hey, this line is unreachable. So if you're coming from Java or even C++, in Java and C++, there is an error. C Sharp is not throwing us an error. This is for me first time as well. I never tried this. Usually we give this in examples. Anyway, so I actually didn't knew that before. I was expecting an error. You'll know everything. Anyway, so break at this point, it's not generating error, funny enough. Usually it means that this line is unreachable, because always when I come to this line, I will break and I will never be able to execute this line. So this creates a problem for Java, C++, I believe Python as well, again, because they all have it. But somehow C Sharp is not complaining here. So we said, perfect, no worries. So it's always recommended that whatever code you write before this, and you can write as many lines of code as you want. There is no need of a block of code, but you can write a block as well. So you can use a block here, and then you can say, for example, this block here, but it's no need. You don't need to confuse your code and just try to keep it simple. So as many statements as you want, you can write here. It should not be a problem. And once all these statements are executed, it breaks and the code just does its job. Okay, so this is what a switch and case examples work with. So we use a variable, do equal to comparison, case is there. If none of the cases are true, default will automatically execute. Let me check one thing. Usually we can write the default at the top as well. It's not, should not be a problem as well, because default by default will execute when all of the cases have been evaluated and none of the cases are true. Okay, so if none of the cases are true, the control goes to the default. So you can write the default statement at the top as well. It doesn't need to be at the bottom. That's one other thing. For if else statements, when we write, the else always comes after the if statement. Okay, the else always comes after the if statement. However, in switch, and we can write the default statement before it. One other example that we sometimes end up doing is, what if I write this code? Okay, there's no case here, day 1, and there's a default statement. This is sometimes we give in question in exams as well, and it may appear in some certifications here and there. What happens now if I run the code? Since switch syntax needs to have a case statement, but if you don't use a case statement, perfect, no problem, because again it's evaluating the default. So it's going to go day 1, day here. Since there are no cases here, it's going to assume that nothing matched and I'm supposed to execute the default. This is a perfectly legitimate syntax. Some students do confuse that I must have at least one case. That is not true. You can write a statement without the case, and this means just execute the default statement. Okay, so this is a switch and case thing. Let's try to do a few examples of it so that we understand switch and case a little bit more better, just like we did with if else. Okay, so now let's just come to our new page. Let me open up the compiler and let me just get rid of this code and try to figure out a problem that we can do. Okay, so let's do a simple calculator. Block close, come here, create a simple calculator using switch switch. Wonderful. So let's just create using system. As we know, every C# code has to have a system thing. Then let's just give it a namespace. I'm again going to use the same namespace that I've been using previously. Okay, block start, block close it. Then we're going to need something called a class, because every C# code must have a class. And then we can call this calculator, block start, block close. There we go. Then we know that every code also needs to have something called static, void, and main with capital M. Okay, bracket start, bracket close, a string, argument, array, and then variable. Again, block start, block close. So now we have a very simple uh, boilerplate code for our system. Most people tend to copy it and use the same thing again and again. But as I said, if you're beginning to try to program, make it a habit of typing it from scratch. That way you would understand the structure and syntax more better, and you can use it every single time. So for example, let's just use something called a double variable here, and I can say number 1 is equals to 20.2 d semicolon, oops, 20.9 d semicolon. Again, remember this d was for this double. We talked about this in our data types, that when we declare a data types such as double, it needs to have this d at the end. So we're gonna give this d to n. Okay, capital D, sorry, my bad. And then let's just create another variable called double, and let me make it this num2 is equals to, let me just say 12 and d semicolon. Okay, so I'm not using decimal value here, no problem, we can do that. It works for us very easily. And now let's just say, for example, which operations do you want to perform? Okay, so let's just use something called character operation operator, or double P is equals to single quotations. Remember, in character always has a single quotations. I always tend to forget. and I say, for example, plus. Okay, since we don't have a GUI, we are using variables. If you create a GUI, then you can use that. So if you're interested in this course, later on I will be creating Windows GUI based programming, creating Windows apps using C# and .NET. So do subscribe and hang out, and you will see me this lecture soon on creating Windows based applications for using C#. In that, we will create a calculator again, by which will we have a buttons and plus operators, so you can choose these values and then click on the operator you want to perform, and so on and so forth. Okay, so once we have these three variables, now yes, just use switch, bracket start, bracket close, and we use operator here. Okay, I use operator here because I want to know which operation you want to perform, based on plus, based on multiply, based on divide. Obviously, you know that every calculation will be different. So since this is a simple case, I will use case, single quotations, plus, colon. Okay, so you can do comparison not only integers, but you can use doubles, you can do string characters, you can do comparison whatever you want within our switch statement. In this case, I'm using a character now, so we are evaluating a character. So if this character is equals to plus, you are supposed to do certain actions. Which actions are going to be? We're going to say console dot write line, bracket start, bracket close, let's give a semicolon, and then we're going to say inverted quotations are a result of, and then space, plus num1 plus inverted quotations. Okay, and then let me just, in fact, yep, plus, and I'm going to say o double p plus, and this will be plus num2 again, plus inverted quotations. Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me, I will explain everything in detail. Plus, and then inside the brackets, I'm going to use num1 plus num2. Voila. So now what we have done here is, because I want the result in this form, so I want the result to appear in this, say that result of number one, which is going to be, for example, 12.9 12.9 plus, and the next value is going to be 12, is equals to, which will be 24.9, right? So I want the answer to appear in this format. Now do note that if I break it down inside this, this is result of num1, then this is op, operator, o double p, and then again num2 is equals to answer, answer. So we can have something called another variable here and save this answer there, or we can do a calculation directly here as well. So I can just say this one. Now actually this is what exactly it's going to be look like, because I want the answer to be result of 12.9 plus 12 is equals to 24. Okay, if we break it down into code, we have a string, then we need a number one, because this 12.9 is a number one, and an operator which is plus, and then again I need a number two, which is another variable, is equals to going to be a string, and then the answer from the calculation. Understand? So this in fact is number one plus num number two. Okay, so this will give us the mathematical result. Now this is exactly doing the same thing. So we say result of this number one is there, so we write the number one, but because we want to concatenate this number one with this string, we added the plus sign here. Okay, so this should give us this result of number one. So whatever is the value of number one will be printed. Then after this, we need this plus operator. It can be plus, it can be minus, it can be multiply, it can be divide. We know that, right? I know currently I'm doing plus, but I want to use the same string multiple times. Understand? He said, okay. So we are using result of num1 plus, I want this operator to be printed, but there's a space here. To add that space, I've created this empty string here. So we are saying the result of inverted quotations plus num1 plus and join it with this empty string. So this is going to add that extra space after that number value. And now I need this operator. So I don't know which operator it's going to be selected by the user, right? They can do plus, they can do minus, they can do divide. So this operator value is printed here. So now we're going to say number one, concatenate with this empty string, plus concatenate with operator, plus concatenate with another blank space, which is going to be space after this plus operator. and then print the value of number 2 as well. So this whole expression is going to print this thing for us. It's written in this way. So this space again is quite important, and for this space we have used this empty blank space string. And then finally equal to operator is there, so we're going to concatenate the equal operator and then we're going to print it. Okay, so if you want, let me give space before and after the equal operator as well. This should do the trick. So once this is done, once this calculation is done, I'm going to say break semicolon and control A, control C, hit the run code. See, the result of 12.9 plus 12 is equals to 24.9, exactly what we expected it to be, because this is the how we break it down, and then once we break it down we use the same thing. Got it? So I hope you understand how we format a string with the variable values you in C Sharp. So this is exactly how easily we can manage. If you want, let me just write this string again. Control C, and this we go. So I can say this result of is inverted quotation marks. Then so there's a space after this. So we say plus value of num. Okay, then this value of num, because but then again we need a space here. So that's why we used plus inverted quotations and plus here. Make sense? Makes sense. So in fact, if you don't use the plus, so we use this string. Now operator 2, operator 2. Again, this becomes a little bit more confusing. Previous one was okay. So with this is a space here, this is a space here, number 2, then we have a space here, and then we have a space here. Okay, so this is what the expression further looks like. Then finally, we just add the remaining plus to create that final string. Once you have that, this basically means that if I have a plus, this case becomes true. Now I can copy this whole string, copy, paste it, bring this case a little bit back. Let's be lazy, minus, again the same thing. Now I don't need the comment, but we can leave it there for now. The result of number 1 plus the operation. Now if whatever the operation is going to be, so it's going to be minus now. Okay, if it's minus, this case will be true. It's going to do subtraction. So instead of this plus, I can just use the minus sign. Okay, so now if I have this code, let me just re-execute it. Okay, same output, no error, because again we have a plus here. So what if the user chooses the minus sign, hit the run code. Now see there's a minus here and the answer is 0.9 because the character is minus. So the switch statement will say the value of op or the operator, compare it with the case first one, the case second one. Since this is minus, this case becomes false. It's just like fighting something in your code. So we say, this case is false, this is not true, just remove it. So this will be ignored and it will go and evaluate the second case. If these cases match, sign of this case is equal to the sign of OP, which is minus. Since this match, it will execute this line of code. And it will do number 1 minus number 2. All of the statements remain same. Perfect, wonderful. Then similarly, we can come back here, paste again, instead of this another plus, we can say let's just have something called multiply, and instead of this plus we can use multiply now, and then just self-explanatory. Okay, this is plus, yeah, and then again I don't need these comments here again and again, you just understand it. I can easily remove these comments, and this time after multiply we have a divide, and instead of plus we use a division here. Okay, so if I have minus, it works. If I do, for example, multiply, this will do the multiplication comparison. Since this operator is multiply, this operator multiply, print the statement and do the multiplication here. Why we use these in parentheses? Because we want this to be performed mathematically. Because we are using string and plus plus plus, here the plus operator is not doing mathematical plus but joining two strings together. And here we want a mathematical calculation, and whatever is the answer of this expression, then we need it to be joined here. So we used it inside the parentheses, so this operation is performed separately, just following standard mathematical rules. Okay, and then execute. So now we have this 12.9 multiplied by 12 is equals to 159 or 154.8. Okay, perfect. So this is another example of switch in case that we can use to determine what kind of decision we need to make based on what situations we have available. Okay, so I hope this clarifies few things. Next, we need to go forward and talk more about what do we have left called loops. Oh my God, the most important topics at the end. So now we're going to talk more about loops. So today on day number 7 of this course, we talked about switch statement. Now we're going to move further to while loop tomorrow on day number 8. Okay, so don't forget to watch tomorrow, day number 8. And if you're following along, if you are liking these videos, don't forget to like it, hit that comment and write your feedback. Let me know what you're learning, what you don't learn, what things you don't understand, what more examples if you need. I will try to make more videos or try to reply within that. Okay, so see you tomorrow guys on day number 7 of C Sharp learning in 10 days. This is Dr. Shanbardi signing off.